Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Good evening. My name is Mike Rotolo. I have the pleasure of serving as the Secretary of the Cheshire Home Board and also co-chair of this Circle of Friends. This is our third Circle of Friends discussion. I'm happy to see some familiar faces as well as some new faces. Tonight, we have a really wonderful evening session planned with the Rosen family. So you're going to hear directly from Neil and his parents about the tragic events that led to his spinal cord injury, but also the triumph of the year since and everything that Neil has achieved, both in his time at Cheshire Home and where he is today as well. You're also going to hear from our Director of Admissions, Althea, throughout about some of the struggles that our residents face, particularly in the early times at Cheshire Home, and how important it is for addressing mental health issues and having a strong support system. Just a couple housekeeping things. So in the top right corner, you should see a view button. The best view for tonight will be speaker view, because then you'll just see on your screen whoever's speaking at the moment. You can also, we also ask that you please stay on mute if you're not speaking, just so we can avoid any background noise. But we do want this to be interactive. So at the bottom, there's a little reactions button. You can click on that and raise your hand. I'll try to keep an eye out for anyone raising their hand with a question. You can also just type your question in the chat and I'll maybe jump in and share those questions with our speakers. And then we'll also try to do a Q&A at the end. I just want to acknowledge we have some other fellow board members on the call here. So we have Lisa Albitz, our board chair, as well as Lucille Finelli, Barbara Katz, Scott McCluster, Glenn Moran, and Julie Ruth, I think all on the line. All of the board members at Cheshire, Cheshire holds a special place in our hearts, and there's a reason each of us got involved with Cheshire Home and still do today. So we're actually going to hear from Glenn Moran, one of my fellow board members, about his story about how he became involved with Cheshire Home. So Glenn, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you to all the Circle of Friends for joining us this evening. My involvement came from a friend who was a member of the board, Dr. Sandy Davis. He grabbed me once and told me that he was involved with Cheshire and he thought I should consider becoming a member of the board. My initial thought, quite frankly, was that in my rather busy practice as a trial attorney and family obligations, I really didn't have the time to devote to something like a charitable board. But Sandy persisted, and he told me what charity's mission was and the impact it had on the young men and women who came looking for and willing to work hard to gain some independence back in their life. That hit home for me. As a trial attorney, I handled and still do from time to time cases involving severe spinal cord injuries. And I just couldn't separate my job, my responsibility for the client I was representing from the reality of what impact that had on the young person as well as his or her family. So I decided with that, that perhaps I should take or make the time to become involved with Cheshire. And in the 16 years since I first became involved as a member of the board here, I have seen what can be done in the way of young people dedicated to improving their lives once stricken with a spinal cord injury, young men, young women, young men like Neil, who has gained a good measure of independence in his life through his time at Cheshire, the work that Cheshire has put in, and the work that he did himself to gain back a maximum amount of independent living as possible. So that's how I got to be a member of the board. And now it's my pleasure to introduce George Zeitler, Cheshire's executive director, who has been with Cheshire for 30 years and was just awarded the Eli Pick Facility Leadership Award for 2022. That award is only given to 3% of facilities nationwide. a true honor and accomplishment. George goes above and beyond as a leader and has always made the residents a top priority, both during their time at Cheshire and after they leave. I think I can speak for George when I say he is excited to welcome back Neil and his parents to share their journey with you all. George, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Glenn, and thanks to everyone joining us tonight, especially the Rosen family. We have Neil and his mom and dad here tonight to talk about his journey from injury to independence. We also have on the line Dr. Althea David, who's our Director of Admissions, who has a psychology background. And we have Barbara Katz, who's going to be the monitor. She is also a board member and Chief Human Resource Officer at Crum & Foster to take us through this evening. So Barbara Katz, please take it away.
Thank you very much, George. It's a pleasure to moderate tonight's event and to share the Rosen story. It's been a pleasure for me getting to know the Rosens a little bit, and also as a fairly new board member, I echo the sentiments of Glenn, about being a part of this board and how rewarding it is. So I'd like to welcome Neil Rosen, who was a patient at Cheshire for about 4 years, and his parents, Elliott and Eileen Rosen. So welcome to the Rosens. And I also want to welcome Dr. Althea David, Director of Missions and former psychologist at Cheshire. And we'll be asking questions of all 4 of them this evening. So I'd like to get started with Neil. Hi, Neil. How are you? Good to see you. Sorry it's not in person this time, but wonderful to see you. And I think it'd be great to get to know you a little bit and let everybody hear a little bit about your story. So would you start by telling us a little bit about what life was like pre-injury for Neil?
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for attending. My name is Neil Rosen. I was a resident at Cheshire for about 4 years, as Barbara said, and before my injury, I guess I had kind of a charmed life for a 23-year-old kid. Never really wanted for anything. I had just graduated college. I was working a cushy little job in a real estate brokerage, kind of loving life, and but living a little dangerously. And yeah, I think that's that kind of sums it up, a day in the life.
Okay, well, you shared with me earlier, Neil, that there was an accident that led up to your injury. Would you share with us a little bit about how that came about?
Sure. My injury was caused by a car accident. I was driving under the influence of alcohol and I crashed the car that I was driving. Luckily, no one else was involved in the accident, but that accident did cause my complete spinal cord injury, which then led to my living here at Cheshire Home.
Thank you, Neil. And I'm sure turning it now to Elliott and Eileen, I can't even imagine as a parent the shock and what it was like to get that phone call, I understand it wasn't even a phone call, but to experience that this accident had happened involving Neil. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found out and what those initial hours were like for you?
Sure. We were at our weekend house in Vermont, which is a very sleepy little neighborhood without any services at all. There's no police, there's no ambulance. It's all a volunteer basis through the fire department. And Neil was doing a little summer gig at the lake that we live on, and he was checking boats in to the boat launch there. He got out of work at 5 o'clock. It was Memorial Day. He got out of work at 5 o'clock. It's about a 5-minute drive to our house from where he was. And we started to hear sirens. First one, then another, then another, then another. I looked at Elliott and I said, that's Neil. I got in the car and I drove over to the boat launch, and the police officer there who told me that the road was closed. I said, it's my son. He let me through, and they told me that he had been taken away in the ambulance. They didn't know what the extent of his injuries were. He was unconscious, but breathing on his own. They finally figured out what hospital he was taken to, which was a regional hospital in Rutland, Vermont, about 45 minutes away. Can you take it from here?
We raced up there to be with Neil, and when we got there, it was probably around 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and basically they had him in the emergency room. He was pretty much unconscious from what we could tell, and we had no idea the severity of the accident. And of course, we hoped and prayed that, you know, he would come out of it okay. At that point, they suggested that Rutland could not deal with a spinal cord injury, and suggested that they bring him to either Burlington or Albany. And since we lived at the time in Albany, we insisted that he be airlifted to Albany, which they did. We then raced back home to Albany Med, thinking that they would do something. They wound up, as I said, airlifting him to the Albany Med hospital, and then he basically sat there till the next morning, till a specialist came and did a fusion of his spinal cord column. We still, you know, assumed that he would regain, you know, all of his abilities. And it wasn't until much later, I think, that we realized or came to the realization that he was going to be, you know, paralyzed. And
so you had so much information.
It was a shock to us. It took us a long time to realize the severity of the accident.
Well, so much information coming at you all at once is what I can imagine. And how did you figure out, you know, once you understood the severity of Neil's injuries, how did you decide, you know, how you would handle his treatment and care, and where did you get that information? And was Neil a part of that decision making?
Neil was not a part of that decision making because he was
in and
out of consciousness for 7 weeks. He was resuscitated 3 times. The only thing we were concerned about was his life. We couldn't even think about the next step. Of course, as is the way with most hospital places or caregiving places, they're always looking at next step and where you're going to go from here, and trying to get you to make a plan, which we were completely incapable of doing. We had a good friend who helped us, and she pretty much moved in with us and was on the phone 7 hours a day trying to figure out what we should do, because we were helpless. You know, you just can't even imagine what your life is like when the only thing you care about is making sure that he's alive and he's going to be okay. So our friend came up with Kessler as the next place for Neil. And
we took a day trip there and liked the facilities. And luckily our insurance covered Neil while he was there for the approximately 2 months. And we had a wonderful, uplifting experience. Eileen and I actually moved into a residence inn nearby in West Orange, and basically spent every day with him there while they helped with the therapy.
However, after about 30 days at Kessler, they want to know what your next step is going to be. And again, we will think, what are our options? And they said, you can take him home, which we couldn't, for many, many reasons, couldn't do, or he can go into a nursing home. And we were just heartbroken. How are we going to put a 23-year-old in a nursing home where they probably would never even get him out of the bed? And I don't really know how it came about, but one day Mandy came into our lives. And she said she thought Neil would be a perfect candidate for Cheshire. And so off we go to visit Cheshire Home, and immediately knew this was going to be a great place for Neil. The problem was there wasn't a bed available. Neil went for a couple of weeks to a nearby rehab facility called JDT. And when a bed became available at Cheshire, he moved in.
What struck you as the reason why you knew Cheshire was the right place for Neil?
We spent a day there and we interacted with the other residents, some of whom were very forthcoming and sat and talked with us. We saw everything that Cheshire had to offer, that it wasn't a geriatric nursing home, but more like a college dorm, really. And Neil didn't seem thrilled about it, but he had no idea what his other options, how awful his other options were. Once he arrived there, it didn't really take him too long, I don't think, to fit right in and be comfortable.
And become the mayor of Cheshire while he was there.
Well,
we were not able to find anything like Cheshire anywhere in New York State. And although initially we were hoping Neil would come back home in some capacity, there just was nothing anywhere in New York State that seemed to work.
Because there isn't anything in New York State that can compare.
Very clear that, what Cheshire offers is very unique, and so glad that you were able to find that. And it sounds like a journey with no rule book. So I'm going to turn it over to Althea and just to ask you, from what we've heard so far, it's pretty safe to say, and everyone can hear, that your life has turned completely upside down. The parents, for Neil, certainly. Can you speak to what this moment is like for individuals coming to Cheshire, and tell us a little bit about what you've done in your roles?
So yes, I will definitely speak to that. As the Rosens mentioned, they had originally met with Mandy, who was the director of admissions at the time Neil came to Cheshire, and I've taken over that role since that time. I do have a background in psychology, and I hope that my background helps people as I'm meeting them at this crucial time when people are experiencing grief, perhaps depression, anxiety, trauma, and they're being faced with life-changing decisions that are coming at them a mile a minute. And I'm hoping that I'm helping them, because they do need to make these decisions as they're talking about, the admissions teams are always talking about, as the Rosens already said, the next step. So there are these important decisions to make while at the same time they're juggling the emotions that they're experiencing. So I hope that I'm helping them with that balance so that they can take in the information and process it. And I'm also presenting to them Cheshire Home. So of course, our expertise in spinal cord injury is what we're known for. We also, have people who have brain injuries and other neurological conditions. So, people are learning about a new medical condition. They're learning about their bodies, and I hopefully am giving them the information about how Cheshire might be able to help them in the next leg of their journey.
And what would you say are some of the most important factors to determine someone's success on this journey to independence? What would you say comes into play?
Well, certainly a beautiful example tonight is having the Rosens here because, both as a psychologist and as somebody who's watched families enter Cheshire, it's so important to have healthy family supports or interpersonal supports. There's a person's attitude, their thoughts about the future, their ability to see a future. Then there's very realistic concerns, what are the person's financial resources? What is their medical condition? All of these things are going to play a role. So the more things that they can have going in the column of positive supports, things that are going to help them, things that are going to be positive factors, the better their chances of success are going to be.
And how wonderful to have the support of Cheshire, really looking at the whole person and the family and providing those supports. And, this, I'm sure has been crucial in Neil in your journey. So I want to turn it back to you and talk a little bit about, you weren't involved in this decision-making. You end up at Cheshire. You've had this devastating, life altering moment. What's it like your first day at Cheshire? Tell us a little bit about the first moments of being a part of Cheshire Home.
Sure. Let me first take a second just to thank my amazing parents. I'm still tearing up from the last question they answered, but I wouldn't have even made it to Cheshire if it wasn't for them and their amazing support and love. So with that, I'll move on to the question that was actually asked of me. Day one at Cheshire was scary. It was nerve-wracking and new. And even though I was already in a wheelchair for 3, 6, whatever months, it was still a new wheelchair thing. I was coming to a place where there were already people who were comfortable in their situation. I was very new to it. I was coming from a facility that was full of older people. I was the youngest resident at that JDT facility in Lincoln Park, so it wasn't really a true representation of a nursing home. As we've already established, Cheshire is very different and unique. But I didn't know that when I first arrived, so I kind of isolated and I stayed in my room, and I needed to be urged out to mingle with others and kind of get comfortable in the Cheshire family.
What was some of that urging like? How did the staff at Cheshire support you? And tell us a little bit about some of those activities that helped you to come out of your room.
Well, we already mentioned Althea. I met with her, working psychotherapy, which definitely helped. Initially, I was kind of broken when I first arrived. I was scared and confused and needed a therapist. And she was great, instrumental in helping me kind of regain comfort, being content in my new life. We already spoke about Mandy. She is very good at urging and getting people to participate, come out of their rooms and play games and have fun and try to give you a diversion so that you don't remember how much life sucks at the moment. But you've got to go through that. Everybody has to, but I think it's good.
And PT and OT on site, that was something you went to on site as well?
Correct. Physical and occupational therapy from the time that I arrived at Cheshire was always the paramount activity, the reason to be here. Amazing that it's right on site. I don't think I ever had less than 2 days a week of either PT, physical and occupational therapy. I totally have the therapists here to thank for helping me to become comfortable physically in my new body and, relearn how to play board games and, cycle on a bike and stand up and a million other things that we all take for granted.
Well, speaking of standing up, we understand you have a new milestone with your new chair, which allows you to do that, right?
Yeah, so over the last year, I organized a GoFundMe campaign and I raised about $10,000 to finance the wheelchair that you now see me sitting in, which I was just able to acquire about 2 weeks ago. And it has the capability to actually stand upright, something that none of my spinal cord injury friends have. So I'm kind of the big man on campus in that regard. But I without Cheshire, I would have never, regained the ability to stand. And there's a million things that go into standing. I won't get into them, but another milestone that I wouldn't have been able to accomplish without Cheshire.
So we talked a lot, and your parents spoke to this concept of what's next all the time. There's always the sense of, you move past one milestone, what happens next in this journey. So you had to be thinking at some point about transitioning out of Cheshire and what that was going to look like. Did you set goals for that when you were at Cheshire, and how were you helped to do that?
Yeah, I think it was right around day one at Cheshire that I was starting to think about moving out. But I stuck it out, thankfully. And yes, of course, always thinking about the next step. The goal being after Cheshire for most of its residents to move into a independent or semi-independent living situation, ideally an apartment or home that's handicap accessible. After 4 years of living at Cheshire, despite the overshadowing of COVID, which kind of came at exactly the time that I was getting ready to move out, which was a little bit of a setback, but I think it sort of made me even more eager to make the move. And so with the help of Cheshire and my insurance company, about a year and a half ago, I was able to find an accessible apartment in Madison, about a mile down the road from here. And I was able to secure all the necessary resources to transition from a community style living to community style living. And again, couldn't have done it without Cheshire and all the wonderful people who work here and work with this facility.
And how did you, I know there were some other struggles along the way in terms of your transition, a transition to what you would do for employment, a transition in taking classes. I heard that you took some classes when you were here. So I'd love to hear about some of those, other moments and how Cheshire supported you.
Sure, I have several examples, namely the one you mentioned, going back to school. I had already graduated from college when I had my accident, so I was one of the few lucky ones to complete a degree before getting hurt. But while I was here, as you might imagine, I had some time on my hands and came up with a plan to kind of, with the assistance of Cheshire as far as transportation and finance for a hospitality management certificate program at the County College of Morris. So I went back on a weekly or biweekly basis, taking one class at a time, and Cheshire would transport me to and from school. It was great. It was fun to be back in a college setting. It was great to be furthering my education. I love the event planning space, so it kind of made sense to enter that one. I did not get a job in that particular field, although I am still interested. But also while at Cheshire, I did obtain a job for a company called Stretch Lab, located in Livingston, New Jersey. And I've been working with them ever since, now about 40 plus hours a week. It is very fulfilling. It's great to have something to get up for and, you know, have something to occupy my time and to stimulate me all week long. Again, another milestone that I couldn't have accomplished without the help of Cheshire.
And turning it to your parents, you're watching this from the outside. What were some of the most significant milestones in your mind for Neil, and how did you see him being supported along the way?
Well, his move from Cheshire to the apartment was, again, a very frightening idea for us, that he was going to, A, not be surrounded by the friends that he had made at Cheshire, but to have, you know, the round-the-clock support there that we were comfortable with. He was getting annoyed, but we felt very comfortable with Neil at Cheshire, but yet we knew that he had to move on. So it was bittersweet, I guess.
No,
We were petrified of the prospect of moving. We did go out with Neil looking at apartments, and of course the one he found was much more expensive than we thought we could afford. But with the help of the staff of Cheshire, we worked through the whole process, and we bought a bed, we bought a Hoyer lift, we bought all kinds of supplies that Neil needed. We got the apartment all ready for him, and everything fell into place. It worked out beautifully, and no one was more surprised than I was.
Well, it actually wasn't all that simple, and we didn't do anything.
Well, I remember.
We did some work on the apartment, but I think it took quite a village of Cheshire staff to get Neil to the point where he had medical coverage. I know for a fact that Madeline insisted that he get more than 3 hours of a registered nurse a week, and he has a registered nurse coming every morning. He has a health aide come every evening, and we really did. Again, it fell in our lap. He's moving. What do we do? And this team of people pulled it all together. We had a couple of Zoom meetings, and I can't even remember all of the people that were involved, but it was definitely a village to get him out of Cheshire and into his apartment.
Everyone rose to the occasion, and it was wonderful to see, and to see Neil come and live in his own apartment.
It sounds to me as if there was a lot of support along the way to be able to help in this transition. And Neil, this must have been a little bit scary for you, this sense of moving out of the home that you had known for 4 years. Tell us a little bit about how you were feeling.
As I mentioned, COVID was very real at the time. We were under serious state mandated lockdown at the time. There was a period of like 17 weeks that we were in our rooms. So needless to say, I was very eager to move out of Cheshire Home. But yes, very daunting and a little nervous about not having 24-hour skilled nursing and regular physical and occupational therapy and the other resources of Cheshire at my disposal. But as I think that it's just necessary to move on, and I have to say, I'm sure it's not as easy for everyone as it was for me to transition out. It seemed, although there was a village, it seemed awfully seamless. And I'm very lucky. It's continued to be very smooth for me. As my mom said, I have regular skilled nursing now every morning for 4 hours every day. I have a care assistant who helps come put me in bed in the evening. I think it really worked out well for me. I don't take it for granted. I think it was a lot of hard work that it took to make this work.
And any future goals now, Neil, that you want to share with anyone?
Just focusing on work and possibly relearning how to drive within the next few years. But everything seems to be falling into place very nicely these days, and I'm going to roll with it, so to speak.
And for your parents, the Rosens, tell us a little bit about what you would say you're most thankful for through this what is really an incredible journey that Neil has made and that you've all been on.
I think that I am most thankful that certainly he is alive and well, but has the most incredible, happy outlook. And he just makes me smile, and I think he makes a lot of people smile. So in spite of the fact that he's in a wheelchair, he's probably one of the most positive individuals I've known. I have no idea where he got it from, certainly not me. I have the faith, but he has a positive outlook.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Every day we talk to Neil is a wonderful ray of sunshine, and Neil is the ray of hope. And obviously we hope that someday technology or science will help him to walk again. But in the meantime, he has a wonderful attitude and keeps on plugging along. And we're very thankful for that.
Neil, anything you
We're
want to
making him cry.
Yeah. I am very grateful that I was blessed with a positive outlook that allows me to wake up feeling hopeful in the morning. Again, I know that is not the case for everybody. A lot of my friends and other fellow residents here don't have such a positive outlook or attitude, and I can only imagine how much more difficult it would be to be faced with that challenge in addition to the physical aspect. So there's a million things I'm grateful for, but I'm very happy to be as independent as I am, and a million thanks to Cheshire Home.
And what advice do you have as parents for other parents who have a child or a loved one with a spinal cord injury? Looking back on what you went through, I know it's an incredible result that you've had, but there were certainly moments there that were very, very difficult for you. What is the best advice you can give?
For me, it was just to have faith and pray a lot. I know that doesn't work for a lot of people, and you just don't know what to do. So you have to rely on other people to help and guide you. And thankfully, we had, people along the way until we got to Cheshire, which then was a whole, as I said, a village, a family of individuals who helped us. I know that Cheshire is a small facility, I only wish that there were more of them in other areas. And it's hard to deal with waiting for a bed at a place like Cheshire when you're in this situation. We were just so blessed and fortunate that it worked out for Neil, but I don't know what kind of advice to give other than faith.
Right. I know it's trite to say, but you have to take one day at a time, and every day got a little better. And we're unbelievably happy with the results, both at Cheshire, and now that Neil is mostly independent and takes.
When we spoke, and I met with you, we talked a lot about advocacy and getting the right nursing for Neil and getting the right care. And it sounds like Cheshire was really instrumental in being able to help advocate. And I'm sure that's something as a family dealing with this that is a really important skill to have, to be able to advocate. Can you talk just a little bit about that and share the tools that you were given?
Well, I mean, obviously Neil moved out probably during the worst possible environment with COVID, and we were told that, of course, the aides and the nursing staff, and he went through a service, Beata, and they did everything they could to provide morning and evening help for him. But during COVID, there were a number of days when he couldn't get service. And sometimes we were there and were able to provide some service, but sometimes Neil was not able to get either into or out of his chair and into bed. And he made the most of it. We were able to find a roommate for Neil in his apartment, and Tom helps Neil when he can. He's not a professional by any stretch of the imagination, but he's there for Neil and gives us a huge measure of
peace of mind when we're here in Saratoga and he's in Madison. We're very fortunate that today's technology allows Zoom calls and cell phone calls and emails. So, we do stay very much in close contact with Neil.
And it looks like we have a first question and for Neil. What did people at Cheshire Home do to help you see what is possible for you? What are some of the things that maybe, you mentioned this was devastating. You didn't know what was next. How were you helped to see what could be possible for you?
Good question. Another benefit of being in sort of the feeling of the Cheshire Home community, you've got other people in similar situations. So you can see that, it is possible to still have a life after being in a wheelchair, even though at first it may seem like it's the end of the world. And of course it feels that way. But with time and, it really helps to see other people in the same situation. That's the most important thing. That's why it was so good to get out of the room and participate in the fun activities and get to know people. And it really makes a huge difference with realizing that life isn't over. That's probably the first step in seeing what can be done after arriving at Cheshire.
Thank you. And I think at this point, I'll turn it back over to Mike to take questions. I'm sure many of you have questions for Neil and for the Rosens. So thank you for answering my questions. very much.
Yeah.
Mike.
So thank you, Neil, Elliott, Eileen. Thank you, Barbara. I mean, I think we appreciate your transparency and, being brave enough to tell your story in front of such a large group on the call here. And we really appreciate hearing it. I think it's obviously a very powerful story of what you've accomplished in the years since. And I think you thanked Cheshire Home many times, but I think, to be fair, we have many supporters of Cheshire Home on this call, both individuals and organizations, and without the support of everyone who donates their time and money through grants and individual donations to Cheshire Home, the programs that you talked about and the facilities that you talked about helping you along your way would not be possible. So I think it's a bigger thank you to everyone on this call, in addition to the folks who work at Cheshire as well. I do see another question came through, so maybe we'll start there. But if you do have questions, after this, please do either hit the little reaction to raise your hand at the bottom of the screen, or type it in the chat, or just jump in. But I'll start with this first one that came in, which is for you, Neil. You mentioned playing games and some other things, but what were some of your most enjoyable activities at Cheshire Home? Did you cook with the fellow residents? Like, what were some of the things that brought you most joy on your road to independence?
Eating is a big part of enjoying a Cheshire Home. In fact, my friends and I created a condiment club, where we very eccentrically brought condiments to the dining room table every night, and that was quite enjoyable. A little diversion to keep from going crazy, or go crazy to avoid going insane. We had a little garden club. We did a lot of little extracurricular activities to kind of keep occupied. We played lots of board games together, but I wouldn't have even been able to participate in all those things if I hadn't, first done that in occupational therapy, learning how to play checkers or chess or Scrabble, or Jenga is a big one, good for building dexterity in your fingers. Lots of fun activities. Triominoes is a big favorite here. Lots of fun games and stuff that help pass the time.
Great. And I do know you got to participate in Cheshire Home's casino night, because I remember a very colorful suit that stood out from the crowd. So I think your wardrobe there also helped you stand out. Neil, could you, one more question, can you tell us about your job a little bit? So you mentioned, Stretch Lab and some of the work you do. Do you work from home? Do you work out of your home? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I work for a company called Stretch Lab. We have a location in Livingston and Morristown, where I first started when I was living here in Cheshire, and they provided me with transportation to and from my workplace. I'm so happy to say I've never actually worked remotely since I've gotten this job 3 years ago. I'm not really one to work from home. I really prefer to go in and see people face to face. As you can tell, I'm a people person, and I love meeting new people and chatting and blah, blah, blah. But so now, currently I work for at least 40 hours a week in our Livingston studio. We will be opening a new studio in Summit within the next few weeks, and I will be transitioning to the sales team in that studio, which will make my transportation troubles a thing of the past. I can rely just on the train to get to that studio. Another daunting weak link of being someone in a wheelchair is that you have to rely on special transportation, which is not reliable, and it's very hard to find and hard to come by. So it would be great to eliminate what I normally use for work, which we call Access Link. Is a busing service for handicapped people. Again, not reliable and very frustrating. So it would be a godsend to eliminate that. be able to rely on the train to get to and from work. It's little things that help further independence these days.
Great. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'll open it up to questions. Does anyone want to jump in with a question? I don't see any more in the chat. So if you want to take yourself off mute. Oh, Bob Conley, I see a raised hand. Thank you for using the raise hand button. So go ahead with your question. Mike's all yours.
Not a question, Neil, just as the mayor of your new hometown, I want to welcome you to Madison. So if there's anything you need, please reach out to me, and we'll see if we can make your life in Madison a great one.
How much time you got?
Yeah, that's, I had a feeling I might be opening up a can of worms, but
thank you so very much. That's very generous of you. I will definitely be reaching out to you in your office.
Yep, be happy to sit down and talk about that as you settle in, how your experience is going.
Thank you very much.
Who else has a question? I see another raised hand. I can't see what your name is from the descriptor. So
sorry,
please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Carmela Slavinsky. I'm the executive director of Dawn Center for Independent Living. So lovely to meet all of you. We are partners with Cheshire in terms of helping people get connected to services in the community so they can live as independently as possible. Neil, Elliott, and Eileen, pleasure to meet you. And your story is really something that families should never have to go through, but you've done an amazing job. And Neil, kudos to you. Your personality has really helped you get through probably some of the most challenging times. But I guess it's funny I'm asking this because it's on the heels of the mayor saying, how can I help you? Because I wanted to ask you, Neil, how are you finding access in the community? You talked a little bit about transportation, but what about physical barriers to buildings, to restaurants, to doctors' offices? Can you talk a little bit about how you're seeing that? Are you dealing with some major issues?
I certainly can. It's nice to meet you. I've definitely spoken to people in your organization before. They've helped me immensely when I was trying to come up with places to live and resources to use in the community. I'm blanking on the woman's name who assisted me. Forgive me, I'm looking at my emails. She was wonderful, and I can't remember.
Was it Diane?
Does
that ring a bell?
Doesn't sound right.
No.
Anyway, a wonderful organization. Thank you so much for coming and for asking. I am pretty active for someone in a wheelchair. I go to restaurants constantly. I have to say that Madison is extremely accessible. I love that everything I need is within a mile. The post office, the grocery store, the bank, the pharmacy, everything I need is within wheelchair distance, which is kind of what was the draw to the town. Even more importantly, handicap accessible train station within an hour of New York City is a huge draw to the town. It's very hard to find accessible train stations in New Jersey. There's only about a third of the stations on the rail map are accessible. One of them happens to be Madison, and it's everything.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And when you're ready to be an advocate at the state level, reach out. We'll get you connected.
I would love to. Thank you.
So Lisa, I know you had a question for Elliott and Eileen. So yeah, I guess what would you say to other parents who get thrust into the same situation, right? I know you mentioned the importance of faith and others, but what would be a few things that you might tell parents in this situation?
Well, as Elliott said, one day at a time. I mean, you just have to focus on, although you have to think about next steps, you really have to focus on today. I don't know. I mean, It's a hard question to answer because you have no idea when it's a surprise and you just don't know what to do. It's not like you can plan for a winter storm coming and you get eggs and bread and milk in the house. It's just a shock, and you just really need to rely on other people that can steer you through the mess and the heartbreak.
Yeah, I remember taking a bag full of documents to go to the Morristown
Social services.
social services to try to get Neil on board so that they would pay for the costs of Cheshire Home
Onto Medicaid.
and Medicaid. And I actually have to say that they were very, very helpful with me. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I spent a few hours with one of the agents there. And as I understand it, Neil got on Medicaid in a relatively short period of time. We were fortunate that we were able to private pay for a few months, but luckily it was only a few months. So everyone that we worked with really tried to help us. So.
Thank you for that. Well, we have time for probably one more question. If anyone has a final question or comment they'd like to share.
Don't be shy.
Well, that's the other thing. Neil is not a shrinking violet, and of course, has always been proactive, and we're blessed with that attitude.
Yeah, and I mean, it obviously shines through on this call. So, I mean, with that, I think we're about at time. So I will say a big thank you again to everyone for joining, especially all of our guests and speakers. So thank you, Barbara, for moderating, Althea for your input, and especially obviously Neil and Eileen for sharing your story. If you have additional questions about Cheshire Home, you can always reach out to Kim Boyer in our development office. There's some information pasted in the chat about how to contact Cheshire Home if you have any questions. And if you're in the chat, you see 3 little dots you can click on. You can actually save the chat if you want to save that information on your computer. And then one plug, we have our 40th anniversary at Cheshire Home. So we've been around for 4 decades, and there will be a big anniversary gala on Thursday, November 10th at the Park Avenue Club in Florham Park. So we'd love to extend a warm welcome for everyone to join us. I will call it a wrap and thank everybody again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.